Anyway, so I've decided to think through something or sort of an observation that I've been seeing of late. The observation is, of course, tribalism. Uh, Tribalism is still very, very alive in a lot of people. Right? The simple language barrier uh, itself creates this big gap between communities. And this gap was closed when the Afrikaner decided to introduce Afrikaans in their curriculum. So you ended up with a lot of um, non-white people who could speak Afrikaans, and the language barrier was gone. Right? Of course, yeah, you had the segregation and everything, but the one thing that's always there is a form of understanding when there is common tongue being used. Um, English, English should have been like the bridge that sort of connects us. That's what I thought. But again, according to the observations and what I see, English once again is not bridging that divide because people, um, due to the clan culture of tribe, sort of try to isolate themselves. And I say try because in a democracy you can't really. But then you get this whole this tribe is invading our area, this tribe is invading my area. All those sorts of arguments are relevant data as to how different tribes actually look at each other. And one of the things that I've noticed is that they have picked up what I like to call the boss, the boss, the boss's insult. This is basically insulting someone else based on their tribe. The whole Vambu as a what if you leave your blackies outside, someone takes them, it's a damara. But if someone has stolen your clothing line, then it's a Vambu. You know, such things. They seem like light humor, but there is something deeper to it. The whole concept of die Kavango's as baie vertrouwbaar and baie hardwerkend. The Kavango people are very trustworthy and they are very hardworking. They won't steal, right? These are stereotypes, and these minor stereotypes uh, implode when it comes to national interest, right? When it comes to natural interest, most people look to the elders for solutions, and most of the elders can only communicate in their mother tongue. This means that the most probable candidate in most regions or areas would be one who is fluent with a language that the majority uses, right? So it's not really on merit, it's about this person can communicate, he can understand our plight, right? So in the end, you don't have democracy in play You don't have the understanding of voting in play, and this makes it even more complex when it comes to tribe, because it seems like different tribes gang up when they sort of like debate or discussion about race. They gang up on the Caucasian uh, individual, right? They bring out the past. You suppressed us. Look at all of the damage they've caused. And of course, they have the retreating motion of, I wasn't there, why should this be my problem? Um, which is maturity, obviously, a lack of maturity. And I don't care what age someone is, it's a lack of maturity to not want to be part of the solution to some of the most gruesome events that have happened on our continent, right? So then the race thing makes it complicated, and the tribes come together on that one basis. So that has kind of led me to conclude that tribalism is also motivated um, by influence, power, obviously, as well as um, money and living conditions. The better off someone is, it seems the less likely. I'm not talking about the older people now. You find tribalism is alive in much, much older people. These are the people that would try to call someone a Kwangara, whatever that word means, to try to demean them. Um, in the older generation, I'm cutting those off, the ignorant ones, um, the ones that basically think that age gives them the license to be douchebags, right? So I'm talking about the demographic that understands things. When someone is well off, when they are living uh, in a proper setting and so forth, they are actually more welcoming to the other tribes. So tribalism is something that is born from a perception, and the perception is that the majority benefits while the minority suffers, which is interesting because the minority is actually our Caucasian brothers, and they happen to have most of the economical power, right? So there is that sense of uh, misplaced judgment based on fear. Uh, most people don't approach Caucasians as normal human beings. There's this sense of holier than thou thing, which I completely don't get, but it exists. And it creates a rift because when tribes come together to form solutions, they first have to be unified. And that's the transformation that we need. We need to be unified. We need as much translators as we can get our hands on, and we need to unify each other. The petty things like rumors, oh, that person is like that person is like that, should end because that person is willing to help. there are many different ways in which you can help each other based upon experience. If it were not washed away by tribalism and the other thing, class, it's something I never really took to heart. The fact that I happen to live in the suburbs, I never took that to heart. Um, I'm from Safari, you know, so it was like a so what factor. I grew up in what would be perceived a location there. I didn't see it that way, but when we moved here. So what? It doesn't mean that much to me, but there is a sense of getting out of the hood or whatever. This is the product of alcohol because come into the suburbs and tell me how many places you'll find that sell alcohols apart from in town. There aren't many. Alright. So alcohol related bad judgment. I'm not calling alcohol bad, I'm saying alcohol related bad judgment. It can be forgiven by some. I forgive a lot of people in their drunken rants, but some don't. And in some ways, it brings out a very ugly truth. And the ugly truth is we like to cling to those who are familiar to us. We feel safer with those who are familiar with us. I don't have this trait. Um, because of the dynamics of how I grew up, you know, different people from different places and so forth. Um, but when it comes to our country, and especially when it comes to community building, unity is being disrupted by tribe and racism. Now, the racism that we have now is mostly classism. It's classist. It's let's give them so that they can go away type of mentality, right? Not a sense of being involved, succeeding, and finding some sort of gratification out of that achievement of having helped the community, right? Everybody donates clothing, everybody gives food, sometimes I do, but that isn't enough. Um, because the most vital tool you can give someone is knowledge. Knowledge and then ear. That means listening. When someone is talking and they actually notice someone listening, there is a sense of closure. It is very, very deep and it's bond building when someone is pouring out their heart and someone is actually listening. That's how bonds are built, right? So my observation about our tribalism and the race thing, they all seem to be temporal elements because of the lack of progress in some communities, and some communities feeling threatened by other communities. So there is no threat. There really is no threat. Everybody is pro-progressive. cannot be progressive if we seclude each other. And I'm not saying go out there and make a white friend or go out there and make a black friend. No, I'm just saying if you do enter dialogue with this particular person who is not of your culture, be yourself. Don't try to adapt, because that's something that happens with me instinctively. I change accents, I change grammar, I change the way I talk. I can go from poor English to good English depending on the environment that I'm at. I don't know why, and I sometimes notice it late. But the point that I'm trying to put across is the next divide that we have to conquer is tribal segregation, which is very, very real, especially in our older generation, and they're the ones in power. There was a big deal about the head of state being from a certain tribe. Right, there was a big deal about that. I guess you can attribute it to the same thing as Barack Obama, who was a mixed uh, race, uh, winning the elections, and then of course being, they turned him black again. Um, but you can say it's the same, right? The candidate that won was from a minority tribe, so it was sort of be against a lot of odds, and the rift that it caused, I have noticed, is a tribal rift, which is completely unnecessary, completely unnecessary. Uh, it is a danger to nation building. The danger to nation building is trying to preserve tradition. Culture is something else, but trying to preserve tradition uh, to the point where you have families um, trying to get the other family members' children to get into relationships with their children. You know, the case where you get um, husbanded off or wifed off, right? Uh, this is merely by most minority groups who feel threatened. And the thing is, minority groups should be getting the most attention at the moment because they are the most marginalized. But the majority groups, the numbers, the numbers are more, but on a general scale, right? If you put it down on a proper equal ratio, you'll find out this one group is actually doing better, progressing better than most of the other tools. And we can see this with our most marginalized group, which is the Sun people, right? Uh, the Sun people, the way they get treated is horrible. It's absolutely unacceptable. And when I say the way they get treated is the way they allow themselves to be treated and the way they conduct themselves, because there is a sense of not belonging, right? And these were one of the points of the Silver Jubilee, was for everybody to be involved, for everybody to feel that they are a part of this nation. And if we want everybody to be a part of this nation, then we should come up with collective projects that link different um, different ethnic groups, that link different tribal groups. For example, AR.